My feelings towards Britain are like towards some old girlfriend. It's like one of those old girlfriends you don't really want to stumble upon.
Goran Gocić on leaving Serbia and his complicated romance with the UK. This is Writer's Mosaic, What We Leave, We Carry, the series that tells the true life stories of migration to the UK.
My name is Goran Gocić. I'm a writer from Belgrade, Serbia, and I traveled to Britain twice in my life, and each time I stayed for some years. So maybe I could call this my attempts of immigration. So once it was in '86, and I came back in '88, and second time it was in '98. And I came back in 2001. I tried to immigrate twice, but each time I found a reason to come back to my native country. I come from a family of immigrants. It's the history of my family. My great-grandfather went to America on a ship as a miner, and he lost his life in a mine in Alaska. That was late 19th century. Then my father was also an immigrant. He was expelled from the Communist Party here in the 70s, so he experienced a purge in the 70s, lost his position here, and he moved to Germany and opened his company there, and he stayed there for the rest of his life. My uncles, several of them were also immigrants. One of them was a soccer trainer. He went to South America to work in Peru. The other uncle was a diplomat who was posted in South America also. So for me, it was like some sort of natural thing to think about myself as somebody who could make it, under inverted commas, make it abroad. So I figured, first I was studying English literature. I'd never been to an English-speaking country, and I was studying English. So I thought that it would be a good idea to go to an English-speaking country, Australia or United States. But I didn't consider much because I considered London to be a European capital. So I easily made up my mind to set off to London. I'd never been to London before, and I thought it's a logical place to be. I was into music at the time. I wanted to be a musician. Played guitar and I wanted to become a musician, and I practiced a lot and passionately was thinking about this. Of course, there was another reason. I never been away from my home for a long period of time. I went to holidays, I was hitchhiking around Europe and so on, but it was never more than a month or 2 months Only time when I was away from home for a long time, it was for a longer period, was when I served the army. I was away for a year. But then I wasn't free to do whatever I wanted. There were people telling me what to do, from the moment I opened my eyes until I closed them. I decided to please myself, and then I just sold off my properties and set off to Britain. And there, I started to be interested in cinema, and that became my profession in the years to follow. I became a film critic, and I started writing for the papers. That turned out to be very important because it was one step towards my career as a writer of fiction. First time I went to Britain, I was on the margin, I was at the bottom of the feeding chain. total bottom. And I felt really happy over there. I wanted it that way. But it was, as they say, dire straits. I was in dire straits. But second time, I traveled in a big style. It was completely opposite. At the time, I was already an editor in a big newspaper. It was the second largest newspaper, I think, in the country. It's called also the Daily Telegraph, like the British Daily Telegraph. They had a competition for people who wanted to do a master's degree abroad, and they offered degrees in Britain. I applied for this. I decided it's a good opportunity to, extend my education and maybe try my luck in Britain again. So when I decided to go, I was pondering this, and I was also freshly married, expecting a child at the time. There were many reasons to stay, but I decided to go. So I went to see my boss, and I went to see him. I said, listen, I really like this job. To tell you the truth, I never had such an interesting job in the media. It was my favorite. It's my favorite so far. So I like to keep the job, But I got this scholarship to do a master's degree in Britain. I will go for a year, and then I come back here. Will you keep this position for me? I know that somebody has to do it, but if I come back, would you take me back? He said, don't worry, your job will wait for you, you're very welcome to come back. My advice is also to go, you have this opportunity, it's a good opportunity, so off I go, But this time I had a multiple entry visa already. I also had the right to bring my family with me. And I had enough money for a whole year to make a decent living, to rent an apartment, to buy books, to enjoy myself, It was a totally different position than when I first went there. Off I went in a big style. I think I probably wore a suit when I was at the airport. I think I was in a suit and a necktie, and they treated me like a really real gentleman, which I was, I wasn't fooling anyone. I was a gentleman, and I got royal treatment everywhere. My wife was pregnant at the time. So when we went to British consulate to get visa for her, they said, listen, it's all fine. She has right to go with you, to join you when you study. You have means to support her, and so that's all fine. But since she's pregnant and she's apparently going to have a baby in Britain, you have to pay for the private hospital in advance. So the bill it wasn't billed on the British government, I said, okay, thank you very much for the information. So we phoned up, checked hospitals, and they were all astronomical figures. It was like several £1,000s for like 2 days in hospital, to deliver a baby. Honestly, I couldn't afford it. So we decided that she stays here, until the baby is born, and then she joins me there. As soon as the baby is able to travel by plane, she joins me there. So that's what happened. Two weeks after I left, it was in I think September, October 98. Just 2 weeks passed, and the parliament voted for a new law, information law. So it concerned the media. It had the power to close the media which published unwanted things. And my newspaper, Daily Telegraph, was one of those. So 2 weeks after I left, The police from the ministry, they came to the newspaper. They kicked out everybody from the office and sealed the doors. So everybody thought, this guy is a wizard, you know. He traveled at the right moment, you know. Just 2 weeks before this happened, he must have known something, you know. But I wasn't aware that it's going to happen. It was just pure luck. From that moment on, the fate of the newspaper was more or less sealed, you know. The Cheruvia started to publish it illegally, practically illegally. He printed it in Montenegro, and then he smuggled the papers and sold it in Serbia, but it didn't last long, you know. After that, that was in October. In March next year, bombing of, the NATO bombing of Yugoslavia commenced. At the end of March and in April 1999. So at the beginning of the bombing, a death squad assigned by the federal police killed my boss, killed him in front of his house with 2 shots in the head. It was like somebody killed Rupert Murdoch or something, you know. It was very conspicuous and big thing for us. I like many things about Britain and dislike even more. But the people I was with, you know, they were bums or beatniks or squatters like me, but they were British, most of them. There were some foreigners, but mostly British, you know. And they were very unhappy with Britain, you know. They trashed the royal family, they trashed the politicians, they were unsatisfied with their cut, you know. But I didn't feel that I'm entitled to be critical about some place I chose to come to, you know. So I was like, what are these people talking about, you know? But I never heard anybody blame himself, you know. I mean, you should blame yourself for your situation in life, basically, you know. But I never heard anyone say that it's his fault that he is not rich or famous or popular, or, you know. It's always somebody else's fault. So listening to them, I realized that what's wrong in this thinking, you know. I just spotted the differences. There's nothing wrong with Britain. Probably, when I would think really hard about it, probably I would find some faults. But what I noticed is that my world, you know, where I'm coming from, is very different to Protestant world. And it got me thinking about both. It's substantially different. I think Serbia and Britain are more different than Serbia and Papua New Guinea. Most important, I think, difference, which I prefer the British way in this respect, I think they're superior, is the relation towards profession and work. In the Protestant world, it's paired with religion. Somehow you're redempted if you are a good worker. So many people dedicate themselves to their profession, and it has results. We don't have this. Some people excel in their profession, of course, like everywhere else, in Russia and in Greece and in Orthodox countries, but we don't. It's more like a whim. This ambition comes from nowhere. This ambition is really difficult to. We don't feel that we have reward to this. But then, you know, Britain also, for the majority of people, the working class, there's a lot of cruelty there. How to steer the working class from drinking and having sex all the time to working all the time. the methods to do this are very cruel. You have the regulations which forbid you to sell alcohol from this hour to that hour. We don't have this here. We never had this. Also, the sex politics, how to restrain people sexually. That's what Michel Foucault was talking about. This is serious industry of desexualizing people and turning them into sort of subjects of working force. In this respect, I prefer Serbia and Orthodox countries because we are more relaxed towards obligations here, and people, poor people or simple people, working class people, they can find many, happy moments in their lives. They enjoy a lot of things. It's strongly outlined, between classes, especially. It's very strong line. Now I think I would probably prefer to live in Britain than here. I don't know. Now it's great, for example, in Belgrade, it's one of the best places for 20-year-olds. For people age of my daughter, she's 24 now, it's perfect place. I think she really enjoys herself. But for people like me, I'm 62, not such a great place. I'd probably be better off in Switzerland now. The belief that people in Britain are colder than here, I don't agree with this. My experience is absolutely different. For example, I was living in Hackney at the time. I was renting a house there, and my first neighbor was a guy, almost a colleague. He was a cinematographer. So, we became a little friendly and we started talking. And soon after, I didn't know him for very long, but soon after he left me keys for his apartment. Second thing, I was renting a place from a British couple, and they almost treated me like a son. They gave me this place for much under the market value. I couldn't afford to pay more, so they agreed for a really low price for this house. And then they invited me regularly for dinners, and they were very friendly. My mother did the same for a British girl who rented this apartment here now. So, when people said they're reserved, they're cold, well, maybe some of them they are, but three dots, By studying in Britain from 1998 to 1999 was a great experience. I was at the end of the course. It started in October 98. It finished by the beginning of summer in June. I made a decision, which I regretted bitterly, this decision. But I made a decision to apply for a political asylum in Britain. It was impression at the time. It wasn't just my impression, it was impression at the time in Belgrade, in the media circles, that this is just the beginning, that he's going to be the only one who's killed. In retrospect, it turned out not to be true. They killed Churuvia, and then after him, nobody else from the media. But there was a bit of paranoia in Belgrade that we're going to have stadiums and, like in Argentina. I was under a lot of pressure because I was studying. The war broke out in my hometown, which was a very big shock for everybody, including me. And my family joined, which my wife didn't adapt too well to Britain, so I had to worry about that too. And apart from that, I even started working for BBC as a commentator. A friend recommended me once, said, you have this Belgrade journalist here, he can comment, what's happening in Serbia about bombing and so on. So they started inviting me regularly. So I had a serious job to think about. Almost every day I was on BBC World commenting, and I had to prepare for this. So again, everything, came to me at once. So I could digest this if I had more space in between and more time to think and prepare. I could do all these activities a little better. I would be better husband and better student and better journalist. But to be everything at once, which you usually in life it's like that, you have to be everything at once. You have to have balance in life. When I applied for asylum, it was I think it was impulsive decision. When I applied for asylum, everything turned around. Suddenly I became somebody else. My scholarship ended, so I had to take care of myself. I had to find a job. I had to make a living if I wanted to survive. But then I couldn't move from Britain. I couldn't. I was like a prisoner. Just this prison was quite big. It was a spacious prison. It's the whole British Isles, but but still, it's a sort of prison. When you have a feeling that you can't go, this feeling changes your attitude. But next 2 years, when I was scrapping for jobs and the change out jobs were quite difficult, and my wife had a really hard time adapting, so we decided that we should separate temporarily. So she could go in Belgrade and I would support her with money I make there. That was also a bad decision. At one point I was commissioned to write a book in Britain. So I came all the way from this guy who's squatting and who was a total bum to a guy who's commissioned to do a study for a British publisher. So it's a long way. And it took me from 86 to this book was commissioned in 99 or 2000 maybe, something like that, 99, 2000. So it is, how many years is that? It's 14 years. But yes, I managed to do something, right? The book was about Yugoslav filmmaker Emir Kusturica. I think my becoming a writer has much to do with my immigration to Britain and to London particularly. So when I had to make up my mind, I think that was the right decision between this really well-paid and good, solid job I had in the BBC and this uncertain and underpaid and totally insecure project with these fresh people in the business. Nobody knew what was going to happen. All of a sudden, I had the attention of the global village. I was writing a book in English, so the whole world could read it. The book turned out well. It's to the amazement of everybody. Probably most amazed were the three of us, the two publishers and myself. It turns out this book is international success. It sold really well in the States. It received dozens of good reviews all over the globe, in Japan, in Australia, in Germany. It went into curriculum of several universities, and you could find it in libraries, like probably dozens of libraries around the world. I felt like I'm on the top of the world, And I felt wrongly, I assumed that my career is already traced, outlined, and in a way it's smiling at me, from the other side of the mirror. But the success of this book didn't guarantee the success of the next, It's one book at a time. I thought at this point I was verified as sort of, British writer, and I was treated in reviews, I was treated as a British writer. I wasn't treated as an emigre writer who published a thing in Britain. I was treated as a British writer, and it was like, I like that. At one point, I was, on the top of the world. I had this successful documentary on Channel 4. I was employee of the BBC, and I was assigned a book to write for a British publisher. It all happened in 1 year. Like things are happening in waves. So I felt really I made it, I was like, if I'm gonna get such jobs and such gigs as these, I'm gonna be big, But it also stopped overnight, because this Channel 4 job was a one-off. I was never invited before or after to do documentary like that. Then when I resigned in the BBC, I had some money on a bank account, but as soon as I spent it, I was poor all of a sudden. I was again in the category of desperate people, When the flow of money stopped, I was like totally lost. And then the third thing, I realized that, you can't really make a living out of writing even if you have successful titles. Then you have to have a series of titles you have to publish all the time. The next title was refused, so I was again at the beginning. I was again at nowhere. At the same time, my marriage is falling apart. All of a sudden, I lost everything. So it was overnight success, but it was overnight like a bust, just the same. so at that point, I started reviewing my situation. I realized I made some really bad decisions. So at one point, I decided to withdraw my asylum, and I returned from Britain, and I never visited Britain again after that. Because the plan was that I stay in Britain, and I didn't plan to be famous or big, but I wanted to make a living, decent living, whatever it means. I'm not very demanding when it comes to luxuries. I'm happy with simple things, but you have to make a living. It's not very simple. It's either or. You have to invest a lot of energy and time into a career. But this career was very fragile. My career was it still is. As a freelance journalist and a writer, you're in between the periods of prosperity, when you suddenly have influx of lot of money, you have a good gig and you get a lot of money at once, or you are in some dire straits when there are no gigs and you scrap for a living. My life since then, it's like that. It didn't change much from that point on, I didn't come back into something secure and solid. I stayed in this position because I chose it. But I've always did what I wanted to do. And that's really the point, Sitting here in Belgrade, in my student apartment, a 62-year-old with some reputation, but without any savings. My feelings towards Britain are like towards some old girlfriend. It's like one of those old girlfriends you don't really want to stumble upon. Some girlfriends you want to see again and see how they're doing and how they progressed and smile and embrace and have a glass of wine with, But some girlfriends you feel like they betrayed you and at the end they didn't turn out to be what they've expected to be. When you think about it rationally, it's my subjective feeling. Maybe I'm wrong, But I feel that our relations are cold. Britain, which I think about as she. Britain, is that she? She, So our relations are turned cold and I'm not welcome anymore. That's my feeling. I don't know. It had some of the best moments and times of my life were there, If somebody asked me, would you do it all over again? Probably the answer would be yes. I just feel that, the circle is complete. So I wouldn't have much to do in Britain today. I also feel that Britain defined me in many ways.